All right. Tonight is going to be very different than the way that I normally talk. Normally, I try not to give too much information at one time because the brain can only absorb so much information at once, and this is not a college class where you're taking notes and trying to prepare for a test. So normally I have one governing theological principle, and everything that I teach kind of wraps around that one central theme. Tonight is not going to be that way. Tonight is going to be, it's going to have 4 basic statements, and then we're going to have 3 application points under that, and then each of the application points is going to have subpoints, and it's going to be a lot more like you're trying to learn something for a class. But here's the thing. We've gotten to the point in our study on prayer where we're trying to deal with, okay, if you understand that God wants to have a relationship with you, and if you understand that you don't know the future, so you really don't know what to ask for, and you've gotten to the point in your life that you really want God to be able to speak to you, we struggle with how to hear God. So for the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about how do I hear God? And what we're going to talk about tonight is probably one of the most frustrating parts of prayer for me. So if it's a frustrating part of prayer for me, I'm assuming it's a frustrating part of prayer for you, and that is I'm submitting myself to God. I'm telling God, I'll do whatever you want me to do. Yes or no, I'll buy it or I won't buy it, or I'll move or I won't move. I'll take that job, I won't take that job. I'll do whatever you want me to do, God. Just tell me what it is. And nothing happens. So the question tonight is, what do we do while we're waiting? And there's a lot of things that you can do in that waiting period that will mess up what God's trying to do in your life. So, and there's a lot of things that you can be doing during this time of waiting that will help you receive your answer. So tonight's title is, Don't Waste the Wait. We're going to start with a verse. This is probably one of the few verses that I'm going to share with you tonight. Is Psalms 32, verses 8 and 9. After this, it's going to be a lot of application as opposed to using a lot of verses. Psalms 32, verse 8 says, I will instruct you and teach you in the way that you should go. I will counsel you with my loving eye on you. God is saying that His eye is on you, and He wants to instruct you. He wants you to know His will. See, people struggle with the fact that, why is it so hard? Does God not want me to know His will? He does. But as we're going through this study, you've already heard me talk about the fact that there's a reason that it's hard for us to hear God's voice. He wants to know whether or not we're sincere. But He says, I'll counsel you. If you will take the time, if you will invest in me, I will counsel you, and I will keep my loving eye on you at all times. And then verse 9 says, and this is funny, do not be like the horse or the mule, which has no understanding, but has to be controlled by a bit and a bridle, or they won't come to you. Now, basically, this is hilarious to me. God's saying, don't be a mule. Don't be stubborn. Don't be hard-headed. And don't be an animal that is strong and healthy and yet won't listen. You've got a lot of strength that He has given you. You've got a lot of intelligence that He's given you. You've got a lot of attributes that He's given you. And He's asking you, please, don't be like a mule where I have to hit you upside the head with a 2x4 to get your attention. Okay? What do you do with a big, massive, strong horse? You put a bit and a bridle in its mouth because that's uncomfortable for them. And then what happens is, if you want, the horse knows where he wants to go, and he wants to go to the field, or he's in the field and he wants to go to the barn. And you're saying, that's not where we're going. And he goes, oh, yes, I am, because I'm about 16 times your weight. I'm going to the barn. And you take that bit and that bridle and you go, no, you're not. And he goes, okay, all right, okay, I get it. And you can control this huge, massive beast, this Clydesdale of a horse, with a little piece of metal in his mouth. God said, I don't want to do that to you. This is part of what you've heard me say before, where I really am not comfortable with praying by the Braille method. I'm not comfortable with you having your eyes closed and not knowing what God wants you to do, and you just feel like you're wandering down this hallway and you're feeling from side to side, hoping that God will either open a door or shut a door. God, just shut the door if you don't want me to go in, or open the door if you want me to go in. Because you know what you're doing? It's like a horse with reins on it. You're having to be led to the left, to the right. No, don't go in that door. Don't go in there. Okay, come over this way. Come over. Oh, you're on the left side of the hall. Come over here. Come over. He doesn't want you to do that. He wants to talk to you like you talk to your kids. He wants to talk to you like I talk to you, except he should make more sense and not have a southern accent. But he wants to talk to you like I talk to you. He doesn't want you to have to go through life spiritually blind, going by the Braille method, wondering whether or not God's just going to open and close doors. Because you know what the problem with that is? Satan can open doors too. And if he knows that you're going down the hallway looking for God's will, and you've got your spiritual eyes closed, and the only thing you know how to do is go whether the doors are open or closed, Satan's going to run ahead of you and open some doors because he would love to get you off track. And there's a whole lot of Christians off track because instead of learning how to listen to God, they've just gone by opening and closed doors. And he's saying, don't be like a mule that doesn't even understand what I'm saying, that has to be controlled by a bit and bridle, or they won't come to you. So, if we understand that principle, then the question becomes this. So what are we supposed to do as a group? What are we supposed to do when we earnestly seek God's will and we don't hear an answer? So I'm giving some of you the benefit of the doubt tonight. Okay, so this is part 15 in our series on prayer. And so some of you haven't been here for all of it, and some of you have watched it online or whatever. Some of you aren't convinced yet that God's even got your best interest in heart. You've had things that have happened to you in your past, and you don't really trust God. Some of you in here and some watching online don't even know for sure if they even believe that God is real yet or not, and that's great. That's fine. At least you're asking the hard questions, looking for answers. That's beautiful. Okay? So, but I'm giving the ones that are listening tonight, the ones that are going to get the most out of this lesson tonight are going to be the ones that I'm going to get and give you the benefit of the doubt that you're actually seeking God's will. You're not trying to talk God into doing things your way. You've learned your lesson. You know that you don't know the future and you really don't know what's good for you, or you don't know what's best for you. You think you do, but you don't. And so you have submitted yourself. We don't like that word, submit. We have submitted ourselves to God's will. And when we submit ourselves to God's will, then we can say, okay, it doesn't matter what I want anymore. It's what do you want? And there's nothing more frustrating for me as a Christian to say, okay, God, I am totally submitted to you. I'll do anything you want me to do. I'll go anywhere you want me to go. I'll fight whatever battles you have for me to fight. I will sell whatever you want me to sell. I will buy whatever you want me to buy. I will say whatever you want me to say. I will move wherever you want me to move. I will do anything that you want me to do. Just tell me what it is. Nothing. That's frustrating. It's frustrating when you have gotten to that point spiritually that you really are sold out. You really are one of those crazy Christians who will do whatever God tells you to do. And you ask Him, what is it you want me to do? And He doesn't say anything. That's hard. So what are we supposed to do? If we really are earnestly seeking God's will and cannot hear an answer, then what do we do? In the weeks to come, we're going to talk about what can be in our life, or what things can we do that stops God from answering our prayer. And then we're going to talk about some stuff like that in the weeks to come. But tonight, I'm going to assume that you're not living in sin, you're not suffering consequences of the sin that's in your life and that kind of thing. Or if you are, you have submitted yourself to God, you have repented from it, and you are literally asking God, okay, God, I know I've messed up in the past, but I really want to walk in your steps. I really want to be in your will, and I don't know what that looks like. So I'm asking you, please tell me what it is I'm supposed to do. And you don't hear anything. So I want to give you some help because I'm in that season right now. Okay, I battled this whole lesson this week on a whole different level because I'm in this season myself. God has told me some stuff that is getting ready to happen to me But he's been very vague about it, and I'm asking him, okay, I'll do whatever. I'm ready. Just tell me what it looks like. And he's not telling me. I said, okay, God, I'm ready to go. I'll storm the gates of hell with a water pistol. Just give me the water pistol. Where do I get it? Nothing. Okay, God, I'll give up something if you want me to give up something. Or I'll go get something if you want me to go get something. I'll change the way I'm doing things if you want me to change the way I'm doing things. What do I got to do so that you can fulfill in me what you've already told me that you're going to do? Nothing. So what I'm talking to you about tonight is coming firsthand. These are lessons that I've been learning for years, but it's never any more real than it was this week. So what are some things that can help us get through this? There's 4 main points that I need you to understand before I can give you the practical application. So here are the 4 points, and this is what's going to be on your fill in the blanks. The main thing that some Christians struggle with, or without realizing it, they don't even understand that this is a problem, and that is that there are other answers other than yes. I know, that's a shock. I can see it on your faces. We have used God for a genie so long that the only reason we go to God is to get what we want. We've gone to God and said, God, you know that I need a new car, and you know that my car's a piece of junk, and you know that I need this, and so I'm just claiming it, God, and I'm just asking you to give it to me, and you said you'd meet my needs, and so God, I just need a new car. Well, what if he says, no? That's not what we're looking for. We're only looking for yes. So if we're not careful as Christians, we go to God with the preconceived notion that whatever we ask for, if we ask for it the right way, God's answer has to be yes. Now this is going to step all over some people's theology, and I'm okay with that, because I believe that God fulfills His will in your life regardless of how impossible it is. See, you guys are not an amen group, but boy, if I was in a Baptist church, that would have been an amen group right there. Now, I'm going to say it again because I don't know if you even got it. I believe with all of my heart that if you are living in God's will and you are seeking God's will, He will move mountains in your life. He will do miracles in your life. He will pick up mountains and throw them into the sea, He says, so long as you are in His will. The problem is, we for too long have set our own will, and then we've gone to God and asked Him to bless it. We have said, God, I'm too tired to walk up that mountain, so I'm going to ask you to throw it into the sea. God says, no, that's not how you get stronger, by me throwing a mountain into the sea. You get stronger by climbing the mountain. That's not the answer that we want. We want God to make everything better. We want God to just do what we want Him to do. We just want to be able to rub our Bible like you rub a genie lamp and get 3 wishes. And if you go to God in prayer with that kind of presupposition, you're going to be sorely disappointed. Because there are other answers other than yes. There is an answer called no. We don't like that word either. We really don't like it when we go to God and He says no. But sometimes God says no. Even more difficult for me than yes or no is wait. If I go to God and say, God, I really feel like you're leading me to start a new Bible study, and we could put it in a warehouse and we could decorate it to look like a restaurant and we could have food and it'd be cool, we'd have fellowship. And that would be awesome. Is that what you want me to do? And He goes, yes. Then I go, great. I have no money, but I can go ahead, full steam ahead, because I know that God's behind it. If I ask Him that exact same question, He goes, no, that's not what I want you to do. I go, oh man, really? Okay, I'm disappointed, but I can handle no. But 5 years ago, He told me to start this, and I got all excited and I started making notes, and He was just giving me all this information, and then I went and started looking at buildings, and He said, no, not yet. I went, really? But it was burning in me. I felt that there was a need for a Bible study like this that churches weren't filling, and it kept burning in me. I said, God, if you're giving me this passage, because I don't have the extra time to do this. But if you want me to do it, I'll do it. And he began to give me more notes, and I began to study more, and I began to go into the Scripture and say, well, what do I do with this situation? What do I do with this situation? What do I do when people like this come? And what do I do when people like this come? And he gives me all this information, and we went back and we started looking at buildings again. And God said, whoa, whoa, whoa. Put on the brakes. I didn't say to start it. I said, are you kidding me? It's that weight. That's the hard part. I really believe that for most Christians that really trust God with all of their life, if He tells you yes, you're good with that. Even if He tells you something hard, like I want you to stay in that marriage even though it is awful, you can say, oh, okay, whatever. And if He says, no, you cannot go get that Corvette that you want so bad, you go, okay, whatever. So I think that we're pretty much okay with the yes and the no, whether we like it or not. Where we struggle is where He says, I want to bless you with a new car. Great! When? Not yet. What do we do with that? What do we do with the weight? One of the things that we have to understand before we can even go into any more depth in prayer is that there are other answers, not just yes. When you go to God in prayer, you've got to be careful. You've got to ask yourself tonight, whatever that main issue is in your life, whatever that main thing that you're dealing with right now. When I start saying that what do we do with the weight, then already in your mind you're thinking about something that God's making you wait on. You're already thinking about something that you've been talking to God about for some time and He hasn't answered yet. You're already thinking about it. You know it. So whatever that situation is, you need to understand, you need to question yourself. Are you open to God's answer, or are you only open to the yes? How many of you do not raise your hand? Online, you can raise your hand. How many of you have a friend who's come to you and said, man, I have got this girlfriend. Woo, she is hot, and I am all about this girl. And what do you think? And you go, she's trouble. And they go, nah. So they go to another friend. And they go, what do you think? And they go, dude, there's like red flags everywhere. And they go, They go to another friend. And they'll ask 25 people. And if one of them says, dude, I think she's cool. That's what I thought too. Right? Because they're not looking for the real answer. They're looking for what they want. If you go to God in prayer and you're only looking for the answer that you want, you cannot be in God's will all the time. Because sometimes God says yes. Sometimes God says no. And too often God says wait. So what do we do with the wait? The second thing, so anyhow, on your paper, yes was underlined, so that's the first fill in the blank. Secondly, we long to know what to do. God longs for us to know Him. We long to know what to do. God longs for us to know Him. So what do you even mean by that? Here's what I mean by that. We just want to go to God and get the answer. I'm tired, God. I ain't got time to mess with you. Just give me the yes or the no. Okay? I just want to know what it is you want me to do. Can I buy the car or not? Should I move or not? Should I take this job or not? I don't really have time for all this nonsense. God, just give me an answer. And meanwhile, throughout all of this, God is wanting to build in us a relationship. We're wanting to know what to do. And God said, more than what you do, it's important that you know who I am. See, we want a 5-minute fix. God wants a lasting and intimate relationship. We used to have, back when I had my big shop and we had 26 employees, there was a joke among all the employees, except me, that I don't have time for a John Hart answer. Okay? And everybody knew what that meant, because my job, in my opinion, was when an employee comes to me and they ask me a question, if I give them, now I want you to hear me, because this is going to apply to you too. If an employee comes to me and they ask me a question and I give them a yes or a no, or an A, B, or a C, If I tell them what to do, then they go do that, and the next time they run into that same situation, they're going to come back to me and say, well, is this the same situation, or what do I do now? Hey, John, we've got these 100% polyester shirts, and we've got 4 different kinds of white, and I'm not sure which kind of white to put it on. And I go, that bucket right there. They go, cool, thanks, that's what we wanted. Because that's what they wanted. Just point to the bucket and say that in bucket number 3, that's what you want. I didn't want to do that because I didn't want to forever be answering their stupid questions. Okay? Hey, John, somebody kicked the trash can over. What do I do?
Clean it up.
Clean it up. Okay? But I didn't want to have to keep answering these questions over and over. So here's what I would do. I would come in and say, okay, tell me what the differences in these 4 inks are. And they'd go, oh, you kidding me? I knew it was going to be like a test. Just tell me which bucket it is. I ain't got time for the John Hart answer. I said, no. I want you to explain to me what the differences in these 4 inks are. And when you can explain to me what the differences in these 4 inks are, then you will have your answer. And if I walk them through it, it takes me a whole lot longer because it's a whole lot easier for me just to tell them use bucket number 3. It's a whole lot easier for me once. It's a whole lot easier for them. But then I have to keep doing that over and over and over. Every time they print something with white ink, I've got to answer the same stupid question over and over again. When they learn what the 4 buckets meant and why the 4 buckets were different, although they all look the same, then when they ran into a special problem, they don't have to go to John Hart and ask him. They don't have to call him if he's at home sick in the bed with the flu and ask him which white bucket of ink to use. So I always felt like I needed to explain it to him. Well, the trash can got kicked over, but this stuff spilled out. What do you want me to do? Okay. First, stop the spill, contain it, and I'd walk through a little sequence, make sure, is it anything that's dangerous, blah, blah, blah. Just tell me what to do. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to tell you what the procedure is. Because it's important, because this time there's different trash in the trash can than there is next time. So the next time the trash can gets kicked over, it might not be the same scenario that you have this time. You need to understand what it is about the trash can that's troublesome. You need to understand what it is about the ink that makes it different. And so the running joke was, I don't have time for the John Hart answer. Just tell me which bucket. Some of us go to God. And we just ask him, just give me the answer. And God says, well, let me explain how that works. I ain't got time for that, God. I don't have time to spend 3 weeks in prayer over this. Just tell me yes or no. Do I take the job or not? God says, no. There's more to this decision than whether you just take the job or not. I want you to see how I work in you. I want you to see how the mind of Christ can work in you. I want you to see how the Holy Spirit living inside of you can help you make good decisions. So let me walk you through the process. And we go, just forget it. Just forget it. I ain't even got that much time to pray. Because we don't really want the explanation. We don't really want the knowledge. We just want a fix. We just want a 5-minute fix, a quick answer, and God is wanting to build into us a relationship. He's wanting to help us spiritually understand what He's doing in our lives so that we can have peace and joy and victory in trusting Him in our lives and be able to make better spiritual decisions down the road than the train wrecks that we've made in the past. So sometimes when you go to God with an answer that should be a relatively easy answer like, God, they've offered me a promotion at work. It's going to pay me like double the amount of money that I'm making now. I'm thinking it's like a really good idea. But John said I can't just take stuff like that anymore. I got to ask you about everything, so I'm asking you. And you're just thinking He's going to give you a yes or no. And He goes, well, now let's think about that a little bit. Oh, God, I ain't got time for an answer like that. I don't want to pray about this for 3 weeks. They'll give the job to somebody else. Just give me a yes or no. He's not going to do it. Sometimes the weight that He gives us is because He's building something into you. He will not let that raise. He will not let that job. He will not let that car. He will not let that whatever it is get past you if you are earnestly seeking His will and He takes 2 or 3 weeks to give you the answer. He will protect it until you get there. But what He's wanting is He's wanting you to understand the mind of Christ. He's wanting you to be in an intimate relationship with Him. He's wanting to teach you all the different aspects about this that you've not even understood. We long to know what God wants us to do. God longs for us to know Him. Number 3, when God is silent, that does not mean that He is inactive or uncaring. I want that to sink in a little bit. When God is silent in your life, it does not mean that He is inactive. It does not mean that He's not fully aware of the situation in your life. It does not mean that He doesn't care. And this is the big one. It doesn't mean that He's mad at you. Oh, so many Christians. Satan has defeated so many believers over the years, and still does to this day, because they go to God and they pour out their heart, and He says, just wait. I'm interested in teaching you something through this. I'm interested in you seeing my heart. I'm interested in you seeing me work. I want you to see my mighty hand at work in your life, or whatever it is. And because they go to God and He doesn't give them an answer, they assume He's mad at them. How many times have you heard, I pray, but I don't even think they get past the ceiling? How many times have you felt, well, I try to pray, but I don't even think they get past the ceiling? I don't even think He cares. Because Satan's convinced you that God doesn't care. Well, I'm here to convince you otherwise. I'm here to tell you that He cares so much for you that He died for you. He's not going to die for you and then leave you hanging out on a limb somewhere. He says that He came that you might have life and that you might have it more abundantly. He didn't say that so that He could just tease you and then leave you hanging. God, when He is silent, has not forgotten you. There are things that you can do that stop or hinder your effectiveness in prayer. And we'll go over that in the next week or two. But just because God is silent on a specific matter does not mean that He is inactive. Does not mean that He doesn't care. I'm going to take you back to a story without going to the Scriptures and reading the whole thing, because I did this, I don't even know how many weeks ago it was, or months ago it was, when we talked about Lazarus. And Lazarus and Mary and Martha were great friends of Jesus, and Jesus was in another town, and He was only about 6 hours walk away, and so Lazarus dies. Well, Lazarus is sick. And so they run to get Jesus. And Jesus, the one that you love, is sick unto death. And Jesus said, all right, I'll be there. And they go, okay, hurry. He's like really sick. Yeah, I got it. And it says, and He stayed there for 3 more days. It's because He didn't care, right? It's because Jesus didn't care anything about Lazarus. He only liked Mary and Martha. He didn't care anything about Lazarus. Is that why? Is it because He didn't care that He stayed 3 more days? No. And I told you that, guys, this before. On the 4th day, He goes to see Lazarus. And He tells him on the way that Lazarus is going to be okay. I'll see to it. When He gets there, He finds out that Lazarus has already been dead, and this is the 4th day. And if you will remember that the reason within the Jewish community that they had what we call them funerals now, they used to call them wakes. The reason it was called, you guys have heard the terminology having a wake? The reason that you have a wake is because it was believed for centuries that the human spirit would leave the body when the body died, and the spirit would hover for 3 days. Looking to see, I guess, who was mourning, and did I have much of an impact, and does anybody really care that I'm dead or not? But the spirit would hover around the body, and so they would have a wake, and they would have people that would come. They would pay people to come and mourn and wail and scream so that the spirit would know, oh, we really miss you a lot. Had Jesus come back inside 3 days, if Jesus had come back before Lazarus died, he would not have had the opportunity to do one of the biggest miracles in His entire 3.5 years of ministry, he would not have had a chance to lead people to the Lord and show to them once and for all that I am the Son of God. I even have power over life and death. Because had he come back before Lazarus died, he wouldn't have had a chance to prove that. Had he come back at 2 days or 3 days and Lazarus came back to life, they go, oh, his spirit wasn't pleased with how much we mourned or something, or he's sad because we're so sad. Yay, his spirit went back in his body and he came back to life. Jesus waited intentionally 4 days. Because you know what? If you're going to raise somebody from the dead, it really doesn't matter if it's 4 days or 40 days. They're dead, they stink. Okay, they're gone. Spirit ain't coming back into that body. Wake's over. He waited for 4 days to come back, so that nobody could say that he didn't raise Lazarus from the dead. Nobody's going to say that the spirit just went back into the body. Nobody's going to say that he was in a coma. Nobody was going to say he was holding his breath or some nonsense like that, like they say about Jesus. What does that have to do with this? What does it have to do with this? It has everything to do with this. Because you're in your life and you're asking God why He's making you wait, and Satan has convinced you that you're having to wait because God doesn't care. He doesn't even know that you've got a problem. Your prayers haven't made it past the ceiling. Satan's convinced you that you're not important enough for God to care about. He's busy with the big stuff. He doesn't care if you take the job or not. So you might as well just make up your own decision. Just do whatever feels right to you. Just follow your heart. We talked about the nonsense of that last week. What you don't understand is that when God is silent, it does not mean that He is inactive. It doesn't mean that He doesn't care. Do you really think that He counts the hairs on your head? He keeps track of those every day and then doesn't care whether you get the promotion or not? Do you really think that He says that when you believe Him, that He writes, He scribes? I probably shouldn't go into this, but the word in the Hebrew is gravir, which means He engraves it, which is, that I don't know what Baptists do with that, because God forbid he have a tattoo in his hand, but He engraves your name in His hand. Gravir. Do you think He's going to do that and then keep track of every little detail of your life, including how many hairs are on your head, and then not care whether or not you buy that house? It's nonsense. But what Satan will do is he'll tell you, because God is not answering you right now on your timetable, that God doesn't care. So you might as well just make your own decision, because He knows what will happen if you make your own decision. Some of y'all know what will happen if you make your own decisions. We've all got history of making our own decisions. And that's what Satan wants you to do, is make your own decisions. So all he has to do is convince you that God doesn't care. I'm telling you, just like with Lazarus, so is it in your life. It is not because God doesn't care. It is not because God is inactive. God has got a plan, and there's something about the timing that's important. And in due time, He will answer your prayer. I guarantee it. In due time. There's a reason for the timing. Which brings us to the next point. Sometimes the timing of an issue is more important than even knowing God's will or getting what you requested. Sometimes the timing is more important. He may know that house. I think I've told you guys this story. Everybody knows Charles Stanley, probably from television. And he tells a story in one of his books that he went to look at a house when they were first moving to Atlanta to go to First Baptist, as pastor to First Baptist Atlanta. Actually, he wasn't going as the pastor at that point. He was going as an interim or an associate pastor. And they were moving to Atlanta. They had to find a house. And they looked and they looked and they looked, and they were living with friends, and it was extremely uncomfortable. And Because, you're in somebody else's house and you got your kids and Andy Stanley's running around. Evidently, he was kind of a wild child. And so it's just kind of uncomfortable staying with friends. And they were looking and they were having a hard time finding a house and they were praying about it. And they had a list of what they really felt like they needed in a house. And they finally found one that matched exactly what was on the list. Everything that they needed was on the list. So they go to God in prayer and God says, no. That didn't make any sense. So we're going to go ahead and apply for the loan, and we're going to keep praying about this. And they apply for the loan. He has excellent credit, and the bank turned him down. Had never been turned down before. He said, to this day, we don't know why they turned us down. So now we've got to go back and live with our friends again, because God evidently doesn't understand. Now, he didn't say that. I'm throwing that in for emphasis. He knows better than that. So we have to go back to this uncomfortable situation. We're going to have to go back to living with our friends for another week or so. We're going to keep looking at houses. We've already been looking at houses for weeks. And out of frustration, knowing that God had told them no about that house, they still wanted to go back and see that house again. Have you guys ever done that? Have you ever prayed about something in your life and you knew it wasn't right? And God told you it wasn't right, and you just summoned all your courage and you walked away wishing that you could do it, but you knew that God wasn't in it. And then after a while, you kind of go, well, maybe something's better than nothing. And you kind of go back to it. They went back to the house. It was after a bad rainstorm. And the place in the bottom of the house that would have been his library, where he would have had hundreds of books, some of which were non-replaceable, irreplaceable, was 1.5 feet in water. That house had never, ever had water in the basement. Something about that storm, something about the way the ground had moved, something about something. There was no way that anybody could have warned him. There's no way that anybody would have known. Nobody was trying to pull the wool over his eyes. He would have lost a huge amount of his library and value of his house had he bought that house. God was saying no, not because God didn't care, but because the timing was important. Sometimes God is telling you to wait because He knows that the timing is important. He knows that you want that job. He knows that you're miserable where you're at. He knows that you have another offer. He knows all of that. And you're asking Him, God, I need another job. God, I hate going to this job. I've had jobs like that, people. I know what it's like to on Sunday night start getting knots in your stomach because you hate going in on Monday morning. I know what that's like. And I know what it's like to be out of God's will, and I'll take the knots in my stomach any day. Matter of fact, better than that, I'll teach you how not to have knots in your stomach next week. I'm not going to get to it this week. Sometimes you're asking God, I want out of this situation. And He knows that the job that you've been offered is not as good as the offer that you're going to get in a week. So just hang in there. The reason He's not telling you yes or no, the reason He's telling you wait is because He's going to tell you yes, but He's not going to tell you yes until you get the second offer, because the second offer is going to make you so glad you didn't take the first offer. Sometimes it's the timing of an issue that's the most important. And we are so bent on getting God to do what we want, so bent on trying to get God to give us an answer right now, that if we're not very careful, we'll take things into our own hands and we'll make a mistake. Did you hear that? If we're not very careful, we will be so frustrated in this period of waiting that we will decide to take things into our own hands. We will become so frustrated because God's obviously not doing anything. I might as well just do it myself. Satan has got you so convinced that God doesn't even care about your job or your car or your house or who you date or whatever, that I've been praying this for a long time and He's obviously not care. He obviously is not doing anything. He's obviously just like oblivious to this. I might as well just take matters into my own hands. Therein lies the danger. There is more spiritual danger and downfall in that one phrase than anything else. All the previous 14 weeks that we've talked about on prayer can be wiped out right here. Think about it. For 14 weeks, I've been telling you how important it is to seek God's will. For 14 weeks, I've been telling you how important it is to not go on what your agenda is, but to seek God's agenda. For 14 weeks, I've been telling you that God loves you and He knows what's best for you. And if you will listen to Him, He will eventually move you into a place of prosperity and joy and victory. And it may not look like what you think it's going to look like, but He will give you peace and joy and victory even in the midst of bad circumstances. And I'm telling you all this, and then that comes up, well, then how do I pray? So then we talked about how to pray. And then you say, well, how do I hear the voice of God? So we spent weeks talking about how do I hear the voice of God? And now we get all the way into this part. All the way to week 15. And you can lose it all right here. You can lose it all right here because you, in your mind, decide, because of God's timing, because the answer's not the answer that you wanted it to be, or whatever the case is, because you're wanting a quick answer, not the long answer, you decide, it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it. I've prayed and prayed and prayed. I've asked and asked and asked. He's just not listening. My prayers aren't getting past the ceiling. He must be mad at me. And you throw all of it away. All that you've learned. All that we've talked about for 15 weeks. You throw it all away and do what seems right in your own eyes. And it's all wasted. And then when the decision that you make because you were unwilling to listen to God blows up in your face, becomes a catastrophic failure in your finances or in your marriage or in your job or whatever, then you'll have the audacity to go back to God and go, what did you do this to me for? What have I ever done to you? Why don't you love me? Why is God mad at me? Won't you? You know you will. That's what you do every time a crisis comes along. Every time a crisis comes along, you ask God, why is He mad at you? Every time a crisis comes along, every time something bad comes along, you're going, God, why are you mad at me? Why you do this to me? Did I not deserve better than this? This ain't fair. And God is going, I didn't tell you to make that decision to begin with. You took the reins into your own hands. I had it all worked out. Oh man, I had glory unspeakable ready for you. I had success like you've never known before. You were days away from it when you decided to just take matters into your own hands. I had such big plans for you. And I still do. We can work through this. But it might take weeks. It might take months. It might take years for us to untangle this train wreck that you've made because you wouldn't listen to me. But I've got great plans for you. So sometimes the timing is more of an issue even than knowing God's will. Now we're only going to get to one of the 3 application points, but that's fine. We got the warehouse till at least next week. We can do this again next week. Okay? I would rather go into this and show you this in depth and give you enough examples and enough word pictures to substantiate what I'm trying to say than to just rush through it and fill in the blanks and then you leave here not having a clue how that actually works in your real life. Okay? So if I need to slow it down, then I'll slow it down. And I have. So that brings us to the first application point, and that is, don't waste the wait. You are waiting for a reason. God is not hard of hearing. It's not that He doesn't love you. So what are we going to do during this time of waiting that is productive instead of destructive? What is it that you can do during this time of wait? What can I accomplish in the meantime? What can I accomplish now while I'm waiting? Think back to the situation with Lazarus and Mary and Martha. If they knew then what they know now, they would have spent those 4 days very, very differently. Would they not? Would they have wasted their time and money mourning over somebody that was going to come back to life? No. Would they waste all of their energy and would they lose 3 nights of sleep worrying themselves sick over their brother? No. So be asking God, if you're in a period in your life like I am, where God is saying, wait, then ask Him every day, okay, until you give me the answer, until you tell me what I'm supposed to do. God, I am not taking a step. I will not mess this up. I will not step outside of your will. I will wait patiently on you. So show me, what should I accomplish now? What is it that you want me to do now? And God may tell you, like He told the people at Lazarus' grave, roll back the stone. Do you remember that? When He finally came 4 days later and everybody's wailing and both sisters come up to Him and say the exact same thing. If you would have just been here, he would still be alive. And He says, I know, but he's going to be alive anyhow because I'm getting ready to fix that. And they go, yeah, I know, someday in the judgment. And He goes, no, I'm going to fix it today. And they still didn't get it. And He said, roll back the stone. Do you think that if He can raise somebody from the dead, He couldn't just have them appear on the outside of the rock instead of actually having them roll the stone away? Don't you think that He could raise Lazarus from the dead and then let Lazarus... Think about the entrance that would be. How cool would that be? Not only is Lazarus raised from the dead, he walks through the rock. Okay? How cool is that? That might be as big a miracle as the raising him from the dead. We saw a guy get raised from the dead, and he walked through a rock. And God says, instead of doing that, He says, roll the stone back. And remember, they protested. Are you kidding me? It's been 4 days. He stinks by now. And I'm convinced that had they not rolled the stone back, Lazarus would still be in there. So, in your life, while you're waiting, God may tell you to roll the stone back. In the movie, Facing the Giants, the janitor's talking to the coach, and he gives him an example. He said, 2 guys are praying for rain. 2 farmers are praying for rain. So one goes and puts fuel in his tractor and starts plowing his dusty field, and the other one doesn't. Who's got more faith? The guy that's plowing his field. Sometimes we're praying for rain, and then we're sitting in the house waiting for it to rain. And God says, if it's going to rain, you should be plowing your field, because once it rains, it's going to be too muddy to plow your field. There's a lot of times in our shop when work slows down, and I'll tell the kids, it's coming. God will take care of this. He knows our needs. Have you got your screens ready? I don't need any screens. Get your screens ready. But we don't have any orders. Just get your screens ready. Are you checking messages? There ain't no sense in checking messages. The phone ain't ringing that much. Check your messages. Get ready. Get everything. If you've got 5 days worth of work, then you do that between Monday and Friday. You don't spread that out over 2 weeks because you don't have that much work to do and you're lazy. You get 5 days worth of work done in 5 days, because if you don't, then ain't no sense in praying that God sends you more work. So what is it that you can accomplish while you wait? What is it that God's saying you can do this? If you really believe that God was going to answer you about that job, if you really believe that God was going to answer you in the affirmative about that house, then what would you be doing differently? If God was really going to give you in the future a relationship with a man or a woman or whatever, then what do you need to be doing now? If you really believe that you were going to have that in the future, you need to be preparing yourself now. So while we're waiting, don't waste the wait. Be asking God, what can I accomplish right now? There was a time that we had to re-pour our driveway, and we waited for years because we didn't have the money, and I just kept asking God to give me the money, and again I had to wait because it was very expensive to fix all the water damage that had been done to the foundation of the house and blah, blah, blah. So anyhow, after years, God gives it to us, okay? He knew what the timing was, and I'm assuming that because every year it would drop an inch until it was 9 inches deep. The 10th or 11th year, He gave us the money to fix it. I'm convinced that it's because it was still settling for the first 9 years, and had He given us the money to fix it, we would have fixed it, and it would have broken all over again because it still wasn't settled. That's just my opinion. Doesn't matter. He gave us the money. So we begin to do the work. We begin to prepare the driveway part that's going to have to be reported. We begin to brick up and pour the foundation for the retaining wall. And so we get the foundation poured, the footers are poured now, and the guys are supposed to be there on Wednesday, and Wednesday comes and goes, and they don't come. And the next Wednesday comes and goes, and they're not there. I don't know how to lay brick. And I'm asking God, seriously? Are you kidding me? You're going to make me wait 11 years to do this, and then when we finally get to the starting line, they're not going to show up and lay brick? Are you serious? Is that just, what is that? Is this like a godly humor thing? Do you laugh at this? Do you think it's funny when we have to wait, when we squirm like this? And then I began to realize what I'm teaching you. And that is, God doesn't squirm. He doesn't like to see us squirm, He doesn't take pleasure in us being uncomfortable. He doesn't take pleasure in us being anxious or worried. So I began to think, then what is it, God? What is it that's holding it up? Because the foundations have been poured, and the longer we wait, if we wait much longer, we'll have to tear those up and re-pour the foundations because they're on an incline and they're decaying. I need to lay brick or something. So it's kind of like the clock's ticking, God. I kind of need to know here. And then instead of me going, God, really? The clock's ticking? I need to know something here. Where's the guys at? I changed my train of thought. And I said, I'm not going to waste the wait. I said, okay, God. You waited 11 years. You knew exactly when this driveway needed to be poured. This does not catch you off guard. You knew before these boys were born that they were going to be too busy to lay my brick. This does not even catch you off guard. Kind of ticks me off, but doesn't even catch you off guard. So there must be something about this that I'm not getting. So I asked Him, what can I accomplish? What can I do now while I'm waiting? 2 days into that prayer, He says, have you thought about what's going to happen to that wall at night? I said, yes. I figured out where we're going to put the lights. He said, where are you going to put the lights? And I said, up on the corner of the house so they can shine down. He said, when you're inside a car, do you think you'll be able to see that wall? No. You'll be able to see the wall if you're outside the car because the lights will be shining on it. But no, if you're inside the car, it'll be just right about bumper height, so I don't guess you could see it from inside the car. He goes, don't you think you need to put lights around that wall? I went, ooh, yeah? He said, they got to do that while they're laying the brick. They got to run all the wires inside while they're laying the brick. You try to do that later, it's going to be very expensive. I said, you're exactly right. That day, I went to Lowe's and I bought all the lights to go on that retaining wall so that at night you wouldn't back a car into it. The next day, the bricklayer showed up. The next day, after I went and bought all of the stuff that we needed for the lights, the next day, the bricklayer showed up. So, and I was thanking God. I was really actually kind of sorry for being so ill at Him. I had to apologize to Him. He knew all along. And boy, am I glad that He didn't give me what I asked for. Because it would have been real expensive later. Or I wouldn't have even thought of it later until somebody backed their truck into my wall and broke my new several $1,000 wall down. So God knew all that. You know what? You know what's crazy about that story? Think about it. God cared about my stupid brick retaining wall, and you don't think He cares about your kids or your marriage? Because Satan has convinced you that the reason that you aren't hearing anything from God is because He doesn't care. He cares. He cared about my retaining wall. He cares about dumb bricks piled in a pile on a driveway. That's what He cares about. He cares. He cares about you. And Satan's convincing you that He doesn't. So what do you need to do in the meantime? Maybe you need to make tents. That's what Paul did when he was trying to preach and, had that pesky thing about having to buy groceries and pay bills. So Paul made tents. You're not better than Paul, I don't think. When Joseph was in jail, Joseph got to the point that he did so well helping the jailer that they put him in charge of running the jail. Do you need to repair some equipment? Repair equipment. I have yet to see a fire department that waits for the whistle to blow to wash their trucks and make sure that their hoses are not dry rotted. You know when they do that? They do that on the really pretty sunny days when they could be playing golf or doing something else. They don't wait for the fire to break out before they make sure that the equipment's ready. If you're praying that God does something in your life, then ask Him, what is it that I need to be doing right now so that when you answer, I'm ready to go? What is it that I need to accomplish? What do I need to learn? What do I need to learn in the meantime? I think about David running in the wilderness. And he knew from an early age that God had ordained him to be the next king. He's had the chance to kill the king that's the king now, and he won't kill him. He's waiting for God to take care of that. And he says, I have to run in the desert like a flea. Why? God, how long, he says in Psalms, how long will you make me run for my life when I've done nothing wrong? How long will you make me hide in caves for my life, for my safety? How long, God? But you know what? God didn't deliver him from the desert. God delivered him through the desert. It was during those 7 or 8 years that he was in the desert that he was learning every nook and cranny, every mountain, every valley, because he had to hide hundreds and hundreds of men every time the king came looking for him. He knew every town, every city. He knew who was loyal to him and who wasn't. And for the 40 years that he reigned after that, he was able to protect that land because he knew it like the back of his hand. His men would fight to their death for him because they saw him give his life to protect them over that 7 or 8 years. That desert was not wasted time. So what do you need to learn? I believe that David was learning how to control an army. I believe David was learning how to feed an army. I believe that David was learning all the nooks and crannies and every cave and every possum hole in that desert. I believe that he learned which towns were going to be loyal to him and which ones he was going to have problems with. He didn't even realize it, but he was in school. He was in king school. God was going to make him a king. It was going to happen. He had to go to king school first. What is it that you need to learn so that God can set you free? And when you're in that place that David was in, that point of absolute helplessness, I'm telling you tonight that that's good. A point of helplessness is good. It makes you feel vulnerable. Because you are. Makes you feel weak. Because you are. And when you get to that point in your life where you realize if God doesn't come through, this isn't going to happen, you're in a really good place. God has told me some things that are getting ready to change in my life. He's told me that we are getting ready to ramp it up. And I don't even know what ramp it up means. I don't know if that's personally. I don't know if that's financially. I don't know if that has to do with laugh. I don't know what it means, but he says you need to be getting ready. So, okay, how do I get ready when I don't even know what it looks like? He said, stay with me. And the more I pray and the more anxious I get, the more helpless I feel. Because you know what? I can't ramp it up. I can't ramp it up. I don't know what to ramp up. I don't know if it's going to be finances or business or laugh or family or I don't know what it's going to be. I can't ramp it up. I'm helpless. And the good part about being helpless is this. One, it's humbling. Because it reminds me before He sets me free. It reminds me one more time before He sets me up on a mountaintop that you did not get to the mountaintop on your own. Because boy, we hate the valleys, but when God puts us on a mountaintop, we bow up and say, man, I climbed that mountain pretty fast, didn't I? So sometimes when we're in the valley, He has to allow us to understand our hopelessness, our helplessness. How feeble, how weak we are. So that when He puts us on the mountaintop, which is where He desires us to be, so that when He puts us there, we don't take credit in it. And I'm in a situation in my life where I really believe God has said, we're getting ready to ramp it up. I'm getting ready to ramp it up, He said, to me. And I'm all excited. I have no idea if that means next week or next year. But I am helpless. And the other thing that's good about that, besides being humbling, is that I can't make it happen. I just have to wait. I can't screw it up because I don't know what to do. So there's a real advantage to being helpless. See, if I was Gideon and I had only 300 men left to go against 125,000 fighting men and another 1.5 million armed civilians, and then I would be sitting back here going, okay, I know God said we're going to go attack them, and I'm just trying to figure out how many swords I can carry, and can I get a bow and arrow on my back? How am I going to do this? And I would be messing things up. But Gideon's situation was so helpless, so hopeless, that he couldn't possibly go into battle by himself. He had to wait for God to tell him, this is how I'm going to do it. So if you're at that point of helplessness, don't despair. Don't be upset. Don't let Satan tell you that God's mad at you is the reason that you're in a helpless state. Praise God, you're in a helpless state. Because that's when God can work through you. That's when He will show up. And you will know, like Gideon knew, that the victory was God's, not yours. You can live then on the mountaintop without having to worry about pride and arrogance knocking you back off, because you'll know when you get to the mountaintop, if you've been helpless, that it was God that got you there. And I'll leave you with this. This is the fourth point. Just daily run the play. Just run the play. I'm using a football or a basketball or a sports analogy here. We want to know how the game's going to end. We want to know what the coach's strategy is. We want to know what's going to happen next. We want to know what's going to happen next week, next month. And God just says, run the play. But there's a beauty in just running the play. Every day when I pray, I go, God, I don't know what this ramp it up thing means, but what's the play for the day? What do I do today? All you got to tell me is what I got to do today. What is your agenda for my life today? What is it you want me to accomplish today? Not tomorrow, just today. And you know what? All I got to do is run the play. I'm not responsible for the game. I'm not responsible for the outcome. I'm not responsible for the score. I'm not even responsible whether it makes sense or not. All I have to do is just blindly follow God and say, what is it that you want me to do today? And if He says, rest, then I rest. And if He says, do this, then I do this. If He says, talk to this person, then I talk to that person. If He says, read this or study this, then I read this or study this. And I go, I don't even know what I'm studying that for. He goes, you don't have to know. All you got to do is run the play. I know the game plan. I've got it all figured out. You don't have to know. Just run the play. So don't waste the wait. Ask Him, what can I accomplish now? In this situation that I'm in, what do I need to learn now? I realize, God, that I am helpless and hopeless. There's nothing that I can do, and I am fine with that, because when you show up, it will be obvious to me and everybody around me that it was you, not me, that did this. And until that time happens, what do you want me to do today? What is the play that I need to run today? All the pressure is off my shoulders. All the pressure is gone. I don't have to make anything happen. I don't have to worry about how long we're going to run or how far we're going to run, or I don't have to worry about anything. I'm not the coach. I'm just a player. God's in charge of all that. He's in charge of the outcome. So just show me today, what play do you want me to run? There's peace in that. There's rest in that. That's a load off of our shoulders when we really, truly understand that. Let's pray.